In college football, there is one number that feels impossible: 47. 47 straight wins, an unbreakable record of pure dominance. But the architect of this dynasty wasn't a screaming drill sergeant. He was an English major from Minnesota, a quiet, impossibly graceful man who led with the calm of a professor, not the fire of a coach. So, how did he build one of the most ferocious winning machines in sports history? The answer isn't just in a playbook. It's in the story of a state ravaged by the Dust Bowl, a people desperate for a hero, and a quiet leader who understood that football could do more than win games. It could heal the wounded soul of an entire nation within a nation. This is the story of how Bud Wilkinson took Oklahoma's shame and forged it into a dynasty. To understand how he conquered Oklahoma, you first have to understand the quiet discipline forged in a Minnesota military school, the lessons he learned from a coaching master, and the unshakable calm he earned on the hangar deck of a warship under fire. Charles Burnham Bud Wilkinson was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota on April 23, 1916. His early life was marked by profound loss. When he was just 7 years old, his mother Edith died from injuries she had sustained in a train crash. In the wake of this tragedy, his father sent young Bud to Shattuck Military Academy in Faribault, Minnesota. At Shattuck, he developed a quiet discipline and thrived, excelling in 5 different sports and graduating in 1933. He enrolled at the University of Minnesota as an English major, a path he would follow to Syracuse University, where he earned a master's degree in English while serving as an assistant coach. This academic background directly countered the pervasive dumb jock stereotype and displayed his cerebral approach to coaching. The approach created a gentle friction with his father, C.P. Wilkinson, who ran a lucrative mortgage company and wished for his son to join the family business. The tug of war over his career path revealed Bud's deep seated passion for coaching, a calling he chose over a more conventional and comfortable sit down job. His own parenting style offered a clear window into the man he would become. He was a warm and caring father who, despite his fame, maintained a normal household. His son, Jay Wilkinson, captured his father's parenting style in Bud Wilkinson, An Intimate Portrait of an American Legend. Sometimes when we shirked our responsibilities, Dad would simply do the task we were supposed to complete without comment. The sight of him quietly cutting the lawn we were supposed to mow or clipping the hedges we were supposed to trim was a much more powerful admonition than his yelling at us would have been. We'd rush outside, apologize, and try to take back our jobs. Bud would tell his kids made up bedtime stories about Happy Beaver, a team player who always got along with others, and Bossy Beaver, a disruptive character with an impertinent attitude, a simple but effective method of instilling character that mirrored the clear, unambiguous expectations he set for his players. At the University of Minnesota, Wilkinson became a key player for one of the era's great dynasties, playing both guard and quarterback for Coach Bernie Bierman's Golden Gophers. Under Bierman, Minnesota won 3 consecutive national championships from 1934 to 1936. Bierman was the Silver Fox of the Northland, a coach renowned for his stoic, low-key demeanor and his mastery of fundamentals. He famously admitted, "I never made an emotional speech in my life." His philosophy was not based on razzle-dazzle schemes, but on simple, powerful execution. His teams were a direct reflection of his personality: disciplined, fundamentally sound, and relentlessly efficient. Bud Wilkinson's coaching philosophy was almost entirely shaped by his mentor. "I learned 99% of my football from Bierman," Wilkinson would later state, "not only from the morale standpoint, but technically." From Bierman, he adopted the legendary sideline poise that became his trademark, believing games were won through calm, meticulous preparation, not sideline theatrics. This preparation was always held to Bierman's core philosophy. Don't just get ready for next week's opponent. Build a team whose standards could defeat any champion. Beyond strategy, Bierman instilled in him the importance of the intangible factor of mental toughness. He had the intellectual blueprint for coaching from Bernie Bierman, but the unshakable composure that would define his legacy would be forged in the flames of World War II. His first assignment brought him to the Iowa Pre Flight Seahawks, a service team that functioned as a remarkable nexus of football genius. At Iowa Pre Flight, Wilkinson served as an assistant under head coach Don Farrow, the brilliant innovator from Missouri who was developing a revolutionary new offense called the split T. It was an offensive system Wilkinson would receive a master class in, and one he would later perfect to achieve immortality. More on that in a bit. After Iowa pre-flight, he was assigned as a hangar deck officer on the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, the most decorated American ship of the war. The hangar deck during combat is a place of controlled chaos, roaring engines, spinning propellers, and explosive ordnance, where a single mistake could have catastrophic consequences. From Bud Wilkinson, An Intimate Portrait of an American Legend. The Enterprise had been the target of kamikaze pilots over several weeks. She was hit on March 18th, March 20th, and April 11th, 1945. After repairs, the ship headed for Kyushu on May 12th joined in an intense two-day bombardment of the kamikaze bases there. On May 14th, the Japanese counterattacked. As the crew watched, one kamikaze streaked toward the Enterprise. When it was clear to the pilot he would go past the ship, he flipped the plane and crashed onto the flight deck, his bomb detonating under the forward elevator. Dad was in general quarters on the hangar deck. The forward elevator flew 400 feet into the air. 14 men were killed and 34 injured. Dad was standing behind a beam at the time and was unhurt. Had he been positioned only 3 or 4 feet away, he would have been killed. Wilkinson's legendary sideline calm was not an act, it was earned. When you've stared down death on the hangar deck of the USS Enterprise, the pressure of a third and long doesn't have the same impact. That experience gave Wilkinson a perspective few coaches could ever imagine. Before we get to the dynasty he built in Oklahoma, I'm curious. Who was another iconic figure, in sports or otherwise, whose character was profoundly shaped by their military service? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you're finding this story as fascinating as I do, a simple click on the like button goes a long way in helping the channel like this grow. Wilkinson's composure earned in the Pacific would soon be tested not by kamikazes, but by the rabid pressure of college football. When the war ended, a colleague named Jim Tatum opened the door to Oklahoma, and Wilkinson stepped through. When the war ended, Wilkinson's path was paved by his colleague Jim Tatum. When the University of Oklahoma hired Tatum as its head coach in 1946, they were so taken with his smooth, loquacious top assistant that they made Wilkinson's hiring a non-negotiable condition of the contract. But Tatum's tenure was a whirlwind of chaos. He was a brilliant recruiter, but his win-at-all-cost methods were reckless. After just one season, he was gone, leaving for Maryland and leaving behind a program loaded with talent but buried in a deficit exceeding $60,000 and facing scandal for improper payments to players. The university had a choice: double down on Tatum's reckless path or bet everything on the quiet 31-year-old assistant in the background. They chose the quiet man in the background, promoting the 31-year-old Wilkinson to head coach and athletic director. It was a gamble that would change college football forever, a deliberate move to embrace a new ideal of winning with class, discipline, and integrity. By the way, the university's president at the time, George L. Cross, once sarcastically remarked, "We're trying to build a university the football team can be proud of," a line that has perhaps unfairly stuck with Oklahoma and other football powers ever since. I've heard the phrase about Nebraska at times. The foundation of Oklahoma's on-field dominance was the split T offense. Many teams ran it, but no one ran it like Oklahoma. Wilkinson perfected its execution to an art form, adding his own wrinkle, the no-huddle offense. By calling plays at the line of scrimmage, he capitalized on his team's superior conditioning, wearing down opponents and preventing them from making defensive substitutions, often leaving them confused and exhausted. I'm not going to go into the split T offense here, as I have another complete video about it you can watch after this. On October 10, 1953, Oklahoma defeated Texas 19-14. It was the first of 47 consecutive victories. For more than 4 years, the Sooners were invincible. The streak was not without its peril. On October 30th, 1954, they traveled to face a formidable Colorado team and found themselves in a brutal, low-scoring battle, escaping with a 13-6 victory, the closest call of the entire run. The end came as shockingly as the streak was long. On November 16, 1957, an unranked Notre Dame team came to Norman as 19-point underdogs. The game was a scoreless slugfest deep into the fourth quarter. Then the Irish mounted a methodical 20-play, 80-yard drive, and with a pitch to halfback Dick Lynch, scored the game's only touchdown. The final was 7-0. Oklahoma's first loss in 1,491 days. And as the final seconds ticked away, a funereal silence fell over the stadium. It was the sound of disbelief, the sound of a myth dying. But a myth dying is also the beginning of a legend, and the legend of the 47 was just being born. Now, during this streak, Oklahoma averaged 34.5 points per game, while opponents only averaged 5.9. And an astonishing 22 of the 47 wins were shutouts. The foundation built during those 47 games wasn't just for show. It produced 3 national championships. They shocked the world in 1950. They were a powerhouse in 1955. But the 1956 team, that was Wilkinson's masterpiece. A machine that outscored opponents by a staggering 466-51. Throughout this era, Wilkinson's poised, articulate, and impeccably dressed sideline demeanor became a new archetype for a head coach, a stark contrast to fiery contemporaries like Woody Hayes. He wasn't just building winning teams, he was molding his players into what became known as the Wilkinson Man, a champion who carried himself with class and discipline on and off the field. Beyond the trophies, part of Bud Wilkinson's legacy was breaking the color barrier at the University of Oklahoma. In 1956, he recruited Prentice Gott, a phenomenal running back who became the university's first black scholarship football player. When initial funding for Gott had to be arranged privately, Wilkinson overruled it and personally placed Gott on a full athletic scholarship, making a definitive statement. Gott was a Sooner. The hostility was immediate. One teammate quit, and on the road, when a restaurant refused to serve Gott, the entire team stood up and walked out. When hotels tried to separate him, his white teammates refused to allow it. In an era of mandated segregations, Wilkinson's players made a choice. Their response wasn't just about loyalty, it was a statement. In January 1964, Bud Wilkinson stunned the college football world by retiring at age 47. The deaths of his friend Senator Robert S. Kerr, President John F. Kennedy, as he'd served on the President's Council on Physical Fitness, and his own brother, had spurred him to seek what he considered a more impactful and significant career. He ran for the U.S. Senate and narrowly lost, then transitioned into a successful career as a lead color commentator for ABC Sports, becoming the voice of college football for a generation. He teamed with Chris Schenkel and Keith Jackson, and did color for 4 of the greatest games in history: Notre Dame versus Michigan State in 1966, UCLA versus USC in 1967, Texas versus Arkansas in 1969, and Nebraska versus Oklahoma in 1971. A 1978 comeback with the NFL's St. Louis Cardinals was a disaster. His quiet, cerebral style that demanded total buy in could not translate to a professional environment where authority had to be negotiated, not dictated. Wilkinson suffered a series of minor strokes, and on February 9th, 1994, he died of congestive heart failure in St. Louis at the age of 77. At the end of the book about his father, Jay Wilkinson, included parts of a letter from a member of one of the Sooner football teams who Bud had coached. The great truths which I was able to observe through watching your conduct are the most valuable things that will leave the university with me. You have showed us how to be a gentleman at all times, to conduct myself as a man in the face of any adversity, any temptation, and especially in the face of the easy way out, has been the greatest lesson I've learned. This lesson will go with me wherever I may be sent in life. I hope that someday that I too will be able to maintain such an example as to help others discover the true meaning of life. May you always meet with good fortune, sir, and may you continue leading others as you have led me. You will always have my gratitude, my respect and admiration, and my sincere friendship. Bud Wilkinson's story is more than the 47-game winning streak. It's the story of how one man's quiet confidence reshaped the identity of a team and healed the spirit of a state. But it begs the question, considering the era, the competition, and the cultural impact, was this the greatest dynasty in college football history? Let me know in the comments. I read all of them. And if you enjoy deep dives into the legends of sports and history, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's next.